Hey, welcome back to the Tango Simplified Learning Series. I'm Yelizaveta. This lesson is part 2 of a series that I started a little while ago, talking about what are the basic fundamental skills that you need as a beginner in tango in order to be ready to dance at the milonga. So in the last lesson, I talked about mostly followers and what followers need to keep in mind as they're entering the tango, what they need to learn. So check out that lesson if you are a follower. Today, we are talking about leading in tango, which is very different. And the pathway that I described for followers, you'll find for leaders is actually quite a bit more challenging. And there's very obvious reasons for that. Unlike following, which allows you to start going to the milonga much whenever you're comfortable with the idea, leading is different because you're the one responsible for the direction that you're heading, the moves that the follower executes. So it's quite a bit more daunting to think about going from just beginning in class, learning some figures, to suddenly now you're going to be at the milonga among other dancers. So the overwhelm that leaders can experience is understandable, and this is why a lot of leaders don't stick around, because the learning curve is quite steep, and just because you know tango doesn't guarantee that you will have the guts to actually go to the milonga. So understandably, there's a lot challenges for leaders, and in this lesson I want to simplify it and give you the essential roadmap that you might use to figure out where you're at in your technique and in your skill level, and what is it that you really need to work on in order to feel confident to start dancing at the milonga. There are 4 main core skills that you need to work on as a leader right away from the very beginning. The first one is, of course, posture, and being able to hold your posture in a way that doesn't interfere with your partner's movements and allows you to be comfortable in your body. Right there next to posture, number 2 core skill is, of course, comfortable embrace. Of course, you're going to focus on these 2 core skills for many, many years, but a common mistake for leaders that they make at the very beginning of their journey is over-focusing on vocabulary and learning more and more advanced vocabulary, thinking that the more moves that they know, the better the chances are of them doing well at the milonga and getting good dances. The truth is, a lot of fancy moves do not add up to being a really good dancer. You really have to have the first 2 things figured out: posture and embrace. Now, the third one, I would say, is the one that keeps people from going to the milonga the longest. So there's a whole subcategory of dancers, leaders, who are perpetual students. And the thing that stresses them out the most is navigation. So as a leader, that's something that you have to worry about, whereas the followers do not. That's really the main reason why following is so much more forgiving. You can show up at the milonga and know very little, and as long as you know some of the basics, you can follow pretty easily. But as a leader, you're the one responsible for navigation. So that's the third core skill that you have to be working on at the same time. That's the other it's kind of crazy, difficult part about tango, especially when you're leading, is like, not only do you have to work on the embrace and the posture, but you right away have to work on navigating and being able to maneuver around people and have that presence of mind not to bump into things. The fourth element that leaders specifically have to have under their belt from the very beginning before you go to the milonga is being on the beat. Not necessarily musicality. We're not talking about you being musical. That, of course, as a beginner, you wouldn't be expected to know all the music, but if you're going to dance at the milonga, the minimum that you have to have under your belt is being able to hear and walk on the beat. So those 4 pieces of the puzzle the posture, the embrace, navigational skills, and being able to walk on the beat. Those 4 elements are what you need to focus on right away as a beginner leader. So it's not about mastering a whole bunch of moves. Again, I want to emphasize, a lot of times we think it's the number of moves that prevents us from dancing socially, that we need more vocabulary because followers are going to get too bored dancing with you. But the reality is you just need to focus on these 4 elements, and the one that's going to be the scariest is that third one, the navigation. So how do you practice these things? What do you need to do? Of course, if you can afford private lessons, it's one of the best ways to ensure that you're getting good foundational understanding right away, and you get to feel it with somebody who is doing it correctly. In group classes, you will go through the experience of dancing with lots of different people, and as a leader, that's an important piece of development. But beyond just classes, I highly recommend that you go to practicas and practice the skill of navigating. Really, if you can make your goal to get really comfortable dancing with other people on the dance floor and having to navigate around furniture, if you make that your number 1 priority, this is the skill that's going to help you make it over that challenging hump of getting from class to the milonga space and feel confident enough. So practicas typically are a space where it's sort of in between the class and the milonga, and traditionally practicas should facilitate a more beginner-friendly environment. But if you don't have access to practicas, maybe you just dance at your home with some other people. Like if you have people that you know in your cohort, other beginners, get together and practice dancing together in the same space. It could be the space of your living room. Make it small, make it challenging, because the whole practice of dancing tango at the milonga a lot of times requires you to be able to dance in a very small space with lots of other things going around you. Now, how much vocabulary do you really need to know? I've actually done a lesson on this, which you can check out here. You only need about 4 or 5 moves under your belt in order to be ready for the milonga. So in terms of the actual pieces of vocabulary that you have to memorize, there's not that many. So to recap, when you're just first starting as a leader, posture and embrace are the main things to focus on. The next piece of your challenge is to get comfortable with navigating the space and functioning on a crowded dance floor. And that eventually leads to the musicality piece, which allows us to get into that state of flow. That's really the kind of the progression that we all take. And I don't think this is years. Of course, you'll hear some people say it takes 7 years to finally feel like you have this dance under your belt. I don't think that to get to a place where you feel confident in milonga, you need years, maybe a few months. So even though I say for leaders it's much more difficult and much more challenging, I'm not talking about years and years of suffering. I'm talking about a few more months than what it would take a follower. So don't get stuck in classes. Don't get stuck with this idea that you need to learn more moves, because the main learning that you're going to ultimately do as a social dancer is going to happen on the social dance floor. So for both leaders and followers, the sooner you are dancing socially, the better your progress is going to be. The milonga is part of your development, it's part of your growth as a dancer. So reflect on your own place in your growth right now. See which piece you need to get under your belt, or maybe you realize you already have all these pieces and it's time for you to actually go ahead and go to your first milonga. So I'm curious if you also are a leader in tango and you've been around for a while. What are some pieces of advice you could offer to beginner leaders? What are the essential things you would want to know when you were starting that would make your journey easier? Share those in the comments. Would love to hear from you. Now, if you've made it to the end of this video and you're not yet subscribed, I suggest you click that subscribe button because I post one of these every Saturday. And I hope I see you in the next one. Ciao.